everybody, I am back today with a Spooky Oktoberfest update for week 2. I guess I've been a little slow on working on this guy, but I think I've gotten a fair bit done. I'll show you some of the wet blending that I've done on the demon himself, and I've got a fair bit done on the Eldar. There's still glaringly things that aren't done, like the sword, which I'll be doing later. But I've done some wet blending as well. No line highlighting yet on the Eldar. But yeah, I'll kind of go through this. I'll do a quick turnaround, just slow turnaround here, just to show where I'm at so far. Eldar's still not, I've not really done the ground at all, like the base, and so he's still not glued on. This is the color scheme that I'm going for, and so a fairly traditional Dire Avenger scheme. Like I mentioned, I've done some wet blending on the plates just to give some highlighting, sort of like pre-highlighting to make the recesses darker and the plates lighter, but I'll be doing some line highlighting as well. I've never painted a Dire Avenger with the traditional scheme before, so I'm actually kind of enjoying this, because I kind of prided myself on doing my own thing with my Viltan, with my Dire Avengers, but I actually kind of like doing the traditional schemes too. So even the sort of headpiece, you know, with the plume, I don't know if it's, I think it's a plume, the yellow, black, and red. So enjoying that. Now, I've used, I've abandoned the airbrush for a bit now. Like, I've been using just the brush, and I've used, I've done a 3-color blend on the red. I am really happy with the way it's coming out. I'll turn them up a bit here too. Sorry, I'm going to move my tripod a bit. I am really happy with the way it's coming out so far. I've started on the metallics today. I've just put some base paint on the metallics, but I'll talk about the blending first. If I was just using this just for tabletop standard, I would be really happy with this. Like this, I'm fine with the level of difference in the highlights that I've achieved so far with the 3 colors that I've been using, or in the blends. However, I'm trying to push myself a little bit with this model, and I'm going to be, this is really just my first, it's my first layering of red. I'm actually going to be darkening this overall, and then bringing the highlights back up again. So I'm doing another, this is sort of like the middle of the road of the red coloration. I'm going to be adding overall some extreme lighting and some darkening it a bit as well. Now under the wings, I do have it still fairly dark, although I've done some wet blending there too, and I'm actually kind of happy with that overall. But I went with, I thought about the metallics this morning when I was doing this, and I thought, what should I use? I want to keep it fairly dark. I thought about, I'll take a step back. I've thought about choice in metallics first, and I looked online at some bloodthirsters. A lot of people use the gold armor, you know, like they are meant to be like probably somewhat royalty, at the very least, you know, military commanders within the Khorne army, in many cases. The approach that I'm going for, I told you, is that this is sort of a pretty powerful bloodthirster, but that's been put into servitude by a sorcerer. I want him to be sort of a fairly scrappy bloodthirster, and so I wanted him to have standard metallic armor plating, but I did use some bronze edging, because I wanted it to be dark but still have that sort of warm glow, you know, warm hue, I should say, to the edging, and have some contrast to just the bare metal. I thought about the skulls and whether I should try to be making them like actual skulls. I've seen that done too. I kind of like the idea of the molded armor plating and with the decoration of the skull a little bit better in this case. so I went with that. I thought about which metal to use, and I wanted it to be dark, and I had a couple of different options in my repertoire of paints that I've purchased. And I just decided, in the case for what I'm going for here, I just went with Citadel Lead Belcher. I've always had really good success with it for a dark metal, metallic, and I think it's a very good paint, and so I went with that. And this one I don't use as much, but it's one of these paints that I really like a lot. It's like one of my favorite metallics, but I often find that it doesn't work for what I'm wanting. Like, it's not the greatest paint as far as choices. Gosh, I'm looking for it here. I have it. Oh, here it is. So I actually used the Warp Block Bronze, which I think is a beautiful paint. It really does look so good, but it's very specific, like, and often doesn't work with what I want to use it for. But in this case, I think for the edging on the armor plates, that it will look quite nice. Let me see if I can get a good shot of it. I don't know. Not sure how well that Warp Block Bronze is coming on film. At the very least, it's sort of like a shiny black, but it is a really nice, rich tone. It's just, when it's not the dominant color, you might be able to see it there a bit on the bottom underneath the skull, like the richness that it sort of has. It's very nice color. And so, that was my plan for the metallics. I kind of mentioned my plan to continue to work on the highlighting and darkening it overall, and I likely will be doing some oil washes, like I mentioned in the beginning on this at a certain point too. So, now that I've gotten next steps, now that I've gotten a fair bit done on the metallics, I think I'm going to be working on the bone and the sort of strapping, of the armor, like that he has, keeping it all in place. And I'm going to do that before I start further highlighting with the red. And so yeah, I'm actually really happy with the way it's coming out. I really love this miniature. Two things that I'm just going to say real quick. If you guys watched my last video last week, it's kind of spooky, but I was talking about, or maybe it was actually, for those of you that regularly subscribe, it was actually within the last 2 weeks. I think it was just an update video, and I was talking about this guy, but it was not on the Spookeytoberfest video. But I was talking about Primarchs and 40K, and I mentioned how I thought, probably we'll be seeing a Magnus Primarch model pretty soon. Now, I was actually thinking from Forge World, and I was thinking in the greater scheme of things, but within like a week and a half, many of you may have noticed, they actually have come out, GW, with a demon form of Magnus, which is really, really cool. And so I thought that, given like the span of time that they've been making these Primarchs, and the fact that was a pretty big coincidence that I brought that up and that came out. I had no inside information. So I thought that was really cool. I also, for those of you that like this model, you may be familiar with the sculptor that actually sculpted this with Ultraforge had a Kickstarter called Creature Caster. Now, it's really, really long overdue, and a lot of people are quite upset about it, but they're beautiful miniatures, and he will be shipping out to Canadian customers of the bronze entry level, so like that put in sort of the more minimum entry level, like for the smaller priced models. They're gonna be charging for shipping and starting to ship this month, and I believe next week is when they're actually taking your shipping payment. And I have ordered sort of like a Slanesh, I think they call it a spider demon, but it's a female model. Bit more risque than I usually paint, but it's just such a great looking model, and it is Slanesh, this sort of pleasure god, or and so I will likely be doing one of those, either on next Spookeytoberfest or before then. It just depends. I always buy stuff and seem to have a big lag time. But it is the same sculptor as this. And so I'm really excited about that too, because like I'm painting this and I'm going to be replacing it to sort of like going to have the same spot on the shelf that this one had in its box. So happy about that. And then lastly, I'll just mention for now the question of the week. And so the question of the week, I'm going to paraphrase, was just who is your favorite villain from a horror movie? Now it's funny, I listened to Warboss Tay's video this morning to this, and I was interested in his comments regarding H.P. Lovecraft, just because I like H.P. Lovecraft as well and agree with a lot of his comments. Love that genre. You know, when I first saw this, I initially just saw who's like your favorite villain, and honestly, fantasy and sci-fi don't really come to mind. Like when I think of movies and who your favorite villains are, like I don't immediately go to horror or even fantasy. Like I have like plenty of other villains that I think of, and they're kind of at the top. But I thought about it for a moment, and you know, there are so many, and villains are so important in films that it's really difficult many times to pick a favorite. But I just sort of strolled by my DVD cabinet when I was thinking about this, and it wasn't really hard for me to come up with this one, because it's sort of like I skimmed through a lot of my horror movies, and you could use writing, you don't have to use movies, I know, for this, but I kind of just looked at it, and you know, really quickly I thought of Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. I didn't even really know the character's name. Like I remember them referring to him as a certain model in one of the earlier, better models, you know, of the you know, the sort of androids. But I decided to look at it online because I didn't know the name of the actual villain character, this android that Rutger Hauer plays. And the character name in IMDb is called Roy Batty. So they actually have like a human name for him. I don't remember that in the film at all. Honestly, don't remember him being called that name at all in the film. But I really like this character that Rutger Hauer played. I find him extremely sort of scary, but also quite intriguing in a number of different ways. Now, one of them is just that it's an android, you know, with a human form, and right off the bat, that gives you this sort of sense of alien or non-humanness underneath a very familiar visage, you know, that has a creepiness in of itself. I mean, like just that face value thing. But the fact that, and you know, like he's willing to do things like with human eyes in a jar, just, you know, or basically breaking fingers and doing all kinds of stuff, like without even blinking, because of his sort of non-humanness, that just is a bit frightening, like this idea of it. He really does impart this sense of fright, I think, in the way that the character is portrayed. I'm going to paraphrase the line, but like he has a couple of lines in the movie that I just really love. One of them is when he goes into the place where the guy makes eyes for androids. He's trying to figure out his history, and he literally is scaring this guy to give him information, and he says, "If only you have seen what I've seen with your eyes." I've always really been intrigued by that. Like, it just sounds so cool. It's really thought provoking in the way, and very descriptive, and in the way that line was created. The final scene and the sadness that comes with him in the rain, and just this, even though he's about to like kill Harrison Ford any moment, the idea that, you know, they have a limited lifespan and all he wants to do is live, and that's all he wants, and just the unfairness in some ways of the creation, and then the dichotomy of how they excel in every way and are in many ways superior to humans, their creators, yet can't have extended life. You know, they have this limited lifespan. I think the character, its design, and his portrayal of it, which was amazing, wrapped together, makes for a tremendously well done villain. And you know, I don't know if it's my absolute favorite, but it's sort of what jumped to mind, and truly it's definitely one of my favorites. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this little update. I am looking at other people's projects and stuff too, really enjoying this. And yeah, everyone have a great weekend. Take care.